All right, good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to another session of the BUKIT TIMAH Dialogues here at the school. We are very fortunate today, I think, to have Mr. Liu Taike, who is very much a part of the LKY school family. Many of you will know that Mr. Liu is actually an adjunct professor at the school. He is a highly decorated, I think, architect planner. And as architect planner, he's made a deep impact in Singapore's planning and development through both private sectors and public sector. Mr. Liu currently is director of RSP, Architects, Planners and Engineers. In the 70s and 80s, he was CEO of Housing and Development Board. After that, he was CEO of the Urban Redevelopment Authority and is, in effect, the chief planner of Singapore. After that, he was chairman of the National Arts Council. So, he's really had a part to play in Singapore's development. Please, will you join me in welcoming Mr. Liu?
Thank you, Kenneth. Can you hear me at the back if I speak without the mic? Okay. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I actually make this talk today as part 2. Because about two or 3 weeks ago, I gave a talk about planning in Singapore, and at that time, I didn't have a chance to talk about how the planning in Singapore could be applied to other Asian countries. But so today, because I believe some of you were in that earlier talk, so I thought today I would just go to the part 2, is how can we share the experience with other countries. But for the benefit of those people who were not in the first session, I'm going to okay, this is me. Maybe let me go through this first. You've been introduced already. I thought I would make a quick recapitulation of some of the key principles that I thought would be useful for you to know before we go on to transferability. But I also felt that I should introduce to you what I thought is, I think, a very important issue is in Asia in particular, if we use the European model as a model for growth in Asian cities, I think we are using the wrong model, because European cities grew over centuries, and at the moment, the European cities, basically the population size doesn't grow very much, and in some places even reduces. So if we use a European model to apply and solve the Asian urbanization problem, I don't think we can solve the problem. So I want to highlight that there is a difference, and we have to use a different model, and without being too subtle about it or too immodest about it, I think the Singapore model is a model that you may want to look at seriously. Why Singapore model? Because whatever you see in Singapore today, around 80% of what you see today was developed in the last 40-odd years. And how can we create a city? On the one hand, we should take advantage of the Singapore model to deal with rapid growth, and on the other hand, see how Singapore can do it and not feeling that the city is very raw and artificial. I think there is a technique to be used here. If you go to some other places, if I may quote, say, Seoul, you go to the new parts of Seoul, it looks, the city looks very raw, very artificial. It doesn't look as if it grew organically. And so Singapore, I think we can manage both quite well. So we'll talk about that, and then we'll talk about transferability. Recapitulation. If you may, just allow me, I'm going to have a drink of water first. Sorry. Can you help me? Okay. I would like to just recapture some of the important principles which I talked about in the last meeting. One is importance of planning. Why is planning important? The technical discipline in planning, a lot of people think that city planning is mainly subjective. I want to convey to you that city planning, there's a lot of technical issues involved. And three-way commitment. Planning is a creature of politics. You cannot do good planning without political support. And also talk about why is Singapore experience relevant. So let me start. If the government wants to expound or implement new policies, of course, there are many ways. If it's a social-related issue, you just go through the organizations. But even if it's going through the other organizations, if you want to feel that, okay, I think there's a delinquent children's problem, you go through a social organization, you still need to have a space to build the school for delinquent children. So if you look at the various government policies, sooner or later, this policy will have to be connected to spatial design to realize the policy. And therefore, that's important, very important. If you do not have a plan to cater for these sort of things, then your policy will get stuck. You can't find the space, or if you build say, a delinquent children's school at the wrong place, it also doesn't work. In Singapore, I just want to let you know, for example, you probably notice that you don't see petrol stations in central area. It took us 10 years to solve that problem. Make sure that they are, but you see them, at least 4 or 5 of them, in every new town. It took us 10 years to solve that kind of problem. So any kind of policy, because if you have petrol station in the city, first of all, it's unsightly, and second, it holds up traffic. So we say, okay, this is a problem, we try to solve it. Even small things like this, okay? And therefore, how do you implement policy? Spatial design helps you. Without that, you get frustrated. Policies get frustrated. And so actually, policies, ideas in word form, in verbal form, must be translated, in most cases, into spatial terms. And it is, therefore, an essential platform to strategize. In fact, I've sat in many discussions among economists, and they talk about economic policies, and they get very frustrated. They can't implement the policies. But actually, that was at the time when I was very junior. I was listening to all these learned talks, and I felt to myself that if they had known that these things can easily be translated into spaces, I think the policies can be implemented in no time. So don't underestimate the link between policy and spaces. That's why planning is important. And when you have a spatial design, you can take care of economic growth and environmental improvement. The second point I want to say is the city planning. I sometimes say to people that there are different types of planners. There are planning philosophers. They're the most attractive one. They philosophize and paint a beautiful picture of a city, but they have no idea how to turn the philosophy into plans. And of course, there are planning policy makers. You have architects who pretend to be planners, actually have no clue about planning. I'm an architect, so I'm not downgrading architects. Architects have a very important role in society, but if they don't know planning, they should not pretend that they know planning. So actually, I'm promoting the idea that we need planning mechanics. A mechanic is a person like car mechanics. They know every part in the car. They know how to assemble it together in a logical way. In this world, especially in Asia, we lack planning mechanics. We have lots and lots of planning philosophers, but without a mechanics to help put these ideas together. So I'm going to show you the relationship between planning and planning mechanics. You have a concept as the data, as you see here, a heap of data here. And then we have to say, well, is this a city, or is it a town, is it a resort? Here, my positioning is that it's a male, but it's about 90 kilogram, and therefore it's 1.8 meter high. You have to get the size, you have to quantify the city. Then you say, well, I have to make sure that this city holds up together, so the bones may be your expressways, the veins may be your drains and the electric wires and so on. They have to put in a proper way. Then you have to put organs in the sense that, well, there's an appropriate place for lung, appropriate place for gallbladder and so on. And then you put the dress on. And then finally, if you think that the dress is still not good enough, you put the decoration. That's an icon. Now, most cities don't do it this way. Most cities would design the decorations without knowing where to put it. So sometimes they put it on the eyes, sometimes they put it on the shoulders. And therefore, you go to a city that works on this basis, you can't understand why certain iconic buildings are in such a stupid place, because they don't have a dress design to guide them. So what I want to say here is that most cities look at decoration because it helps a politician to earn credit if you have impressive, iconic buildings. And some cities may go as far as putting a dress on to make the city look good, but very few cities worry about producing a healthy body. But I think in Singapore, we spend a lot of time producing a healthy body before we talk about the dress. And maybe lately, we talk about icon. I'm not sure the icon we've chosen are the correct ones, like the integrated resorts, simply icon. Okay, I think there must be some other better icons we can think about. But at least we've gone through a reasonably good process. Now, translating this into planning terms, in Singapore, this one we showed in the last talk, so I will just do it very quickly. We have this broad concept. Then we protect the water and the green areas because those are our most valuable assets. And then out of that, we create the bones, and so these are the MRT lines and also the expressways. You combine them, they're integrated. They are not done separately this way. And after that, we look at the important organs. The darker the purple means the more pollutive they are. For example, the one on this side is a Changi Airport. It's a noise pollution. Put them away. Then the rest of them, in kind of faint yellow colors, would be the residential area. And only after doing that, we put what we call the land use plan together. Now, many cities will start with the land use without knowing where that's why actually when I see a lot of city plans, my first comment almost invariably is to say, well, your city is seriously in shortage of expressways. Seriously. Nobody thinks about that. They just start filling in the small squares. Okay. So So this is the first concept. There's a kind of planning mechanics role to put a city nicely together. The second one, which some of you also saw in the last talk, is it's a commitment with politicians, professionals, and private sector entrepreneurs. It's a three-way. So you have government, you have the people, the entrepreneurs. So the government will set policies. This forbidden land is what you saw earlier on, the water course, the lakes, the water course, the green area, and also historical buildings. We mark them out first and not to touch them. And that's exactly what I did when I was doing the Singapore Master Plan. Because there's enough land to go around. You don't have to squeeze yourself into beautiful lake area or beautiful historical area. There's enough land. Why do people squeeze into lake area and the historical area? Because you make good money straight away if you build housing around the lakes. And also, the historical areas tend to be the places with the largest crowd. And therefore, if you build a commercial building there, if you put down a historical building, build a tall building, you get your profit straight away. Therefore, people always squeeze into those areas. But in Singapore, we protect them first, then we plan somewhere else. So, but the government must take a lead on the policy on this forbidden land, take a lead in planning, and as you go along, your involvement with your role as a government continue to decrease. So when it comes to architecture, the role of government is simply to check your plan in terms of planning compliance, building compliance, but don't get involved in designing the building, which many governments do. They design the building for the architects, even though the government officials are not architects themselves. Okay. So the first, policy and forbidden land, is an issue of value. Do you value your natural assets? What kind of policy you think would be necessary for your community? Then good planning is something to do with the health of the city, sustainability, and of course environmental, macro-environmental arrangement. That means where do you have your high density, where you have a low density, how do you make use of the waterfront, and so on. That's a kind of macro-environmental issue. Then urban design, and so on. So basically what I want to say is that in a good plan, government policies leads planning, master planning. Master planning then guides urban design, and urban design guides architecture. But in most cities, 99% of cities, it's exactly the other way around. So why is it important for government to take the lead? Because the government, with all the data it collects, has a macro view, whereas the private sector only collect their own individual data for their own type of business. It doesn't have macro view. So they are not in a position to think for the whole city, but the government is in a position. If any government chooses not to do that role, then I think those people should not be in the government. So, of course, there's always a concern to say, well, if the government plays such a big role, is it going to dictate the life of the people? Here, again, there's a kind of attitude issue. I'm happy to say that despite all the things you hear about Singapore government, it is disciplined enough to create the city plan in terms of creating a nice stage design without dictating what should go on in the stage. Because if the government dictated what should go on in the stage, I don't think our economy can be as thriving as it is today. I don't think our art scene, at the infancy stage, admittedly, can be as thriving as it is today. The government does not dictate the activities. The government simply provides a setting for economic and cultural growth to take place. And the role of economic growth and cultural growth would depend on the quality of people to do it. So the people, private sector, must are left to act out the life's drama on the stage created by the government. Okay, but in the government there are two parts, the politician and the professional. Politician must take full responsibility on policies. Professional then will come in to deal with planning and urban design, but in decreasing dosage. Okay. But in many cities, it doesn't work like this. The government, the politicians, will not pay enough attention on the policy side, but get very involved with architecture, because I think all of you must admit that everybody loves to be an architect. You know, everybody, including politicians. They all think that when you are a mayor, you're automatically assumed to be a great architect. And they do that, or they interfere with architects' work. And the city planners, government officials, also love to be architects. So they also help the politician to interfere with architecture, but not doing their work in managing the macro environment, not doing their work in protecting historical buildings and the natural environment. And therefore, when you are leaving those parts not done, what happens? The private sector comes in. They'll tell the government, say, well, I think you should change the policy. This is the policy you should have. And all of these policies, of course, would mainly be beneficial to the individual companies and not necessary to the whole city. This is a typical model in all the cities. Okay, so I think, so you need to know that a kind of logical, healthy, three-way commitment is critical for the successful development of a city. Okay, the last point is that why is Singapore relevant? I think I've heard this before. Because Singapore is an example of an Asian city done mainly by Asians, reaching international standard in one generation. In other words, of course, we don't want the rectification of a city, the work to last forever, for centuries. Singapore demonstrated we could do it within one generation, between 1960 and 1985. The basic foundation was laid in that 25 years. And we solved this kind of problem. We solved the problem of high-rise, high-density, high speeds. Now that is it's a very typical Asian need, because we're scarce of land, there's a scarcity of land, but there's a lot of population. The tendency for high-rise, the need for high-rise is there. So we have demonstrated how you can deal with high-rise, high-density, and still achieve a kind of garden city environment, and also build at very high speed. Now, so there's always an issue that, what about your identity? Okay, I don't think we have done a perfect job. I think, but nevertheless, with the protection of heritage buildings, with protection of rivers and lakes and so on, if you go around Singapore, and the protection of our nature reserve, jungles and so on, and swamps as well, it has a uniqueness that no other city can duplicate, because that grew in the past. It's not something you can create. So it's important that when you do the city, you must romance with the land. You have to have a courtship, sympathetic courtship with the land, and not rape the land as many city governments would do. So what are the image makers we use in Singapore? Nature, heritage, even the road system gives the image, parks, CBD, and therefore. But normally people will talk about urban design and architecture, forgetting that there are so many other things which creates the total impression of the city. We are using too narrow, too specific a tool, architecture, to create image. Actually, that is really shortchanging every city. There are so many other tools you can use to create identity. Okay, so that's recapitulation. You understand what I said, right? Okay, it's in English anyway. Now, two basic models. I call them, one is slow organic growth, one is rapid mechanistic growth. Organic growth means you just let time, just take care of itself, just keep spreading. But if you have to develop your city and solve your urban problem very quickly, you really have to think like a car mechanics and really put the parts logically together very quickly and let it grow. Okay, many European cities and even old Chinese cities are of the first type. But Asian cities, Singapore, the second type. The beauty of this first type, of course, is spontaneous, it's random, full of surprises, very rich textures. We all love this kind of cities. Diverse because it grows over a long period of time, a diverse architecture expression. But to cope with today's need, particularly traffic need, it's less efficient. So in the case of Paris, they have to create many tunnels in the old Paris to cope with the traffic problem. Examples, if you see them, you see how attractive they are. They are totally attractive. Okay. This one. Okay, they're all amazingly attractive because they have the advantage of growing over a long period of time, over centuries. And whereas we have to build a lot in a short time. Of course, this is a kind of montage, is somebody's dream about what a city should look like, or even London. Now, rapid mechanistic development, because you have to grow. Now, why do we have to grow so fast? Because, say, in China, I think when China first started this kind of economic liberalization, urban population was around 20%. Today, it's about 40%, just over, so it's double. Now, 20% translated into Chinese population size is about 260 million people. Now, how do you cope with that? Okay. So you need to assemble a city plan very quickly and let it grow very fast. Okay. We have to live with coarse texture and also a narrow band of architecture expression, but we try to make the best out of it. Okay, one city that until today is still very controversial, Canberra. I think Australians have difficulty deciding whether they love the place or they don't like the place because it's mechanically put together. But the environment, fortunately, is very good. Good place to live. but may not be an interesting place to enjoy. Brasilia is another one, very mechanically put together. You can see. I don't think this is a good solution to urban development, but as an example, I want to quote. This is Singapore. Now, what are the issues? When you develop your city, you have to ask yourself, I mentioned earlier, so I will not repeat too much, is your city facing the issue of slow organic growth, or is your city facing the issue of rapid mechanistic growth? I would say in Asia, it's almost without even looking at the city, I can guess it's the second type. So you must recognize that and use the appropriate technique to deal with the problems. Okay, if you ignore the type, appropriate type, I think you miss the opportunity to get it right. Okay, and actually, just now you saw the demonstration of a human body put a dress on. Well, below the human body, you see all those messy bones and veins and so on. Now, that is really the inner working of a mechanistically assembled city. But you can always dress it up, with nice muscles, nice dresses, nice icons. So a mechanically assembled city doesn't have to be ugly. But I deliberately use the word mechanistically put together, the word mechanic, because to show you that there is a need for every city to know all the parts of a city, all the different parts, and find a way to assemble them correctly. If you don't even take the trouble to know the parts, you cannot create a good city. Okay, this is a bit of tongue-in-cheek. So, to my mind, a master plan for the whole city, long-term, like in Singapore we use year X as a time span, is critical. Then the Central Business District Plan. These are the key plans, and maybe a typical new town plan. If you can get these key plans out, and maybe a tourism plan, I think you are on the way to assembling a city that works well and maybe even beautiful. So let's recall what we said earlier. Can you read this? It's a policy direction. The government has to do that. And you set aside all the forbidden land. Now, important to have a good master plan. I call this a pillar of good planning. Important to have a master plan. Important to have a good central business plan, because central business district is the face of a city. So you go to, I think I said it last time, you go to Paris, you say Paris is beautiful. It's an incorrect statement. You can only say the central part of Paris is beautiful. That's correct. So the central business district is very important to give you the first impression, like the face of a person. And then you have support with the strategies, planning, urban design, supporting all these plans. Now, if you can do that, you achieve a city that has a healthy body and a beautiful suit. And you create a good urban image. When you have that, your economic growth will be smooth. People will want to come to your city to invest. And hopefully, with proper education policies, it becomes a creative society and bring in more economic growth. And when you do that, this city gets recognition, gets respect. And this is the way I think a city may be heading. Okay, how do we apply this, okay, I think the rest of the transferability, we'll just give you examples, and then after that we'll open for Q&A. I'm looking at megacity, city, CBD. As you know, just now I said the central pillar of city planning is city and central business district, new towns, housing estates, cultural. This is the transfer of our experience to other cities. Urban planning, because people ask me that, well, since Singapore is so tiny, only 700 square kilometer with 4.8 million people, how can you deal with the problem of China at 1.3 billion people? How? I think it's a legitimate question, but the urban planning issue is not at the level of a country, it's the level of a city. I think our experience is still relevant. Okay, so the basic, that's why I talked to you earlier about some of the basic concepts are still transferable. And of course, we have to decipher which type of city you belong to. But before I go further, I want to pause a little bit longer, because there is still an issue that Singapore, we plan the city for 4.8 million or eventually 6 or 6.5 million. But many cities around Asia have population today of 18, 19, 20 million. How do you deal with that? If you're using the experience of Singapore to apply to those cities, it will not work. So I'm going to just quickly take you through, just in case some of you came from cities with 15, 20, 25 million people. In fact, I was horrified to hear that Lagos in Nigeria today has 17 million people. In 7 years' time, it will grow to 25 million. Now, how do you deal with this? It's a problem. Okay. Here, you can see that we think that below the city should be new towns. But if you look at the new town, the history of new towns, the earliest one that we talk about, Garden City, was only for 32,000 people. If you have 18, 19, 20 million people, how do you deal with the organization of the communities at 20, 32,000 people? Not possible. So even post-war Britain went through about 3 stages of new town growth. It just keep making the new towns bigger and bigger in order to cope with the population of London, Greater London. Singapore, we took a look at that. We said that even at 250,000 may not be enough to solve our urbanization problem. So we set a target of 200 to 350,000 people. That's the plan we have today. But that's for Singapore at 6 million people. What about 18 million people? So this is just to give you a taste. I don't think I can explain the full implication of it. So if you take a city which is a mega city, suppose it's that big, and then you have a kind of random growth because there's no master plan, and random expressways because there's no master plan, or even random railway system, and even random commercial centers. Of course, this city can't work, but that is a typical example of most megacities today. Now, can we reorganize it? Suppose we organize it as this is 18 million people population. Maybe we'll organize it into 6 cities of 3 million people. Okay, that's the moon that you're seeing, with satellite towns and neighborhoods and so on around it. And so this is one small city in a mega city. And you've got a new towns, you've got a metro system, even the commercial centers, CBD, even green belt in between, and then duplicate them this way. Of course, when I say duplicate, it doesn't mean that you rubber stamp them. You still design according to the location of each of the city. And maybe this is a solution that we need to look at, because there's just way too many megacities in Asia today. We need to find a way to do it. And they're linked together by commuter trains. I had the opportunity to apply this one to Nanjing. Okay, Nanjing, because Nanjing is, you see, the original plan, the north of Nanjing, the white portion is the existing Nanjing. North of Nanjing, they still plan as if they are a collection of individual new towns. So I told the government official, I said, let me plan the north of Nanjing. And this is Yangtze River. This kind of small strip of blue is about 3 kilometers wide. So you cannot cross the river so easily. So I did a plan like this. Now, in this plan, the northwest part, is a city of about how many? This one is a city about 2.8 million or something like that. So it works quite independently from the southern part, and therefore you don't have to keep crossing the river on the few number of bridges. In fact, if you go to Nanjing and ask the citizens and officials, what are your biggest problems in the city? They said, traffic congestion on the bridges. Okay. Because they did not think in terms of the what I introduced earlier, the constellation city concept, is to break the city down into smaller cities. But now they are taking this very seriously. They're planning this now with me in greater and greater detail to make it work. Now we're talking about mega city. Let's talk about city. I want to show this, although this one I don't think it will be implemented. It's for 1.1 million people, just to show the whole process of city planning. Okay, this is the city around the water. We organize them into new towns, because this is a small city, 1.1 million people. The blue portion would be the petrochemical plant area, with a green separator to separate the pollutive environment from the living environment. Put in the road system, and this is typical. They want each city to have its own theme, which is totally meaningless, but I don't want to disagree with them. Let's put it in. It's just totally no meaning. Okay, I give the name, but I still do my own, the usual thing, put all the facilities inside. Okay. Then you can see the metro line, we put it in. The left-hand side is the whole city. The right-hand side is zoom-in portion to help you see more clearly. Then we put in the broad zoning. The pink areas are commercial areas. And then a little bit more detailed land use. Then plot ratio, or FAR. That means the ratio of the building on the site against the land. If you have a piece of land, 10,000 square meter, you build 30,000 square meter of building. It's a plot ratio of 3. In America, it's called FAR. Okay. So we in a city plan, we have to take care of all this, and even the building height plan related to plot ratio. And in fact, and of course, I make sure that the green areas are protected. In fact, the job would have happily finished here, but For commercial reason, they said, well, we want to do some kind of artist impression. So to do so, I have to do this, what we call the figure ground. That means the footprint of the buildings. But since I have to do it, I have to show that in the city, the footprints of the buildings vary according to the land users. So it's not just one footprint, it's different types of footprints. And then we even have pedestrian linkages. And after that, we do the model. So, and of course, the model is not as realistic as the artist impression. That's more realistic. Okay, this is another one. It's one of the new towns. And this model, because the client is willing to pay for it, you have lighting as well. Nice scene. Okay. But this is this lighting. Daytime it looks like this, artist impression. Okay, more model. Okay, this model from the sea. A little bit artificial, so we'll make it a bit more realistic. This can look like this. Okay. Now, the process is a correct one, but actually for most city, this last bit of the visual thing, they're not important. They're just the dresses, the medals. You can see a few medals here. Okay. But at least these medals are located at the right places because of the plan before that. Now, what the client wanted me to do was to do the last bit without the front part. Of course, I refused to do it. Okay, so I think the rest will be easier. For example, in Saudi, I have King Abdullah Economic City. This is the site. Now, those are residents. I mean, it's so exciting to see a site like this. They had an American to do this, and the client said, well, can you improve? And I looked at the plan. There are quite a few problems. I said, I don't want to improve on it. If you want to, I'll do an alternate one, which I did. This is my plan. And just to help the client understand it, I showed them what I mean. For example, you see, so you can see that, for example, from here to here, this is like, no, from here to here is like from the Louvre to the La Défense. That's how big it is. Okay, from here to here, this part is the central area. It's like from Central Park South to Wall Street. So there is a scale. Of course, the idea is that to plan this first, and then fill in the detail later, step by step. This body of water is the same. You can see similar in size, but actually bigger than Darling Harbour in Sydney. So it gives you a sense of scale. So as a planner, when I drew those lines, I have to have a sense of scale, what I'm trying to do. Okay. So they are now talking to me again to see how I can take this into the next step. Okay. Another one, this is just for, also in Saudi. So these are just the usual kind of clothing and medals I have to design for them. But just to make sure that you don't think that I only plan for Saudi, so we do this city in Yangzhou, which is next door to Nanjing, 3.5 million people. First of all, we try to, the city center is here, but there are lots of kind of big and small towns here. So we try to analyze them and try to strengthen the towns, the rural areas, so that the population will not all flock into the city. So you have a better control and not over concentration. I think that in my last talk, one participant from Brasilia asked me, what do I do with that? Maybe this is a solution, is to not just to plan the city, but to plan the surrounding area to accommodate the population. And then after that, let me see, if you take a look at this part here, this part. This, by the way, is Yangtze River also. You organize them in zones. The red areas are the commercial areas. Okay, and organize them in new towns. But this place is so beautiful. We actually set aside a lot of green area. So when I think if they really stick to this plan, it will be even much more a garden city than Singapore. Much more. This is the kind of environment we're talking about in this city. Okay, CBD, for a city of 14 million people, they asked me to design the central business district. This is the existing central business district. They told me, they said, well, we would like you to create a central business district in these boundaries. I said, if you restrict me to this boundary, I don't want the job because it's an artificial boundary. It's not a natural boundary. They said, okay, you do whatever you like. Not really. I simplify it. So this is my solution to central business district. And these are the kind of images for future. You probably think that the density is too high. It's because it is a city for 14 million people. You need to cater for a lot of floor space. Yeah. By the way, let me see. No, can't see from here. Nanchang is a smaller city. So they wanted a central business district here, whereas the population is here, but they want it here. I said it's not logical that you put a central business district not where the population is, but it should be here. They said, well, they've already decided. In fact, they already moved the city government there. They have to carry on. I said, okay, if you were to do that, I need to help you bring the population to the north to get a better balance, so that again you don't have, huge traffic congestion on the bridges. This is a smaller bridge. It's only about a smaller river. It's about 500 meters wide. So this is their current plan. It's just no order, just putting colors, whatever they like. So I try to reorganize it to keep the commercial content more concentrated. And I have to leave this away. Leave this one untouched because this is where the government already occupied. So of course you have to respect the government buildings. And then we do the so-called building footprints. And I have to do this. But it's useful to show them what we plan. New town, we did one in Abu Dhabi, like this. This is for about 350,000 people. And again, we went through all the kind of healthy body type of thing, but we have to show them the dress. That's the only part they want. They don't want the others. Okay. In Malaysia, we also did a new. This is the plan they gave me. You see the problem here in this area. Based on our experience, you cannot support such a huge amount of commercial. To a developer, they want the commercial as huge as possible, but you don't have the population support such a huge amount of commercial. And second, this is not the best view. The best view is here because you can see the sea here. So, just to cut a long story short, you can see that the commercial we give them in blue area, in blue color, is a more appropriate size, but better location with, fronting the river, making use of a river side. And we also were invited to do housing estates. I'm going to go through this just quickly. We did a neighborhood for them. and design this part. And of course, the client felt that, well, it's better to have more architects than one, so they gave this to other people. But I'm happy to say that visitors who went there